So throughout Holy Week, the way we do it at church here is that we read Palm Sunday on Palm Sunday, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, and do you guess what we read on about Easter? Easter! So we don't do the whole Passion, and one of the reasons we do that is so that we can sort of live through the ups and the downs and the certainties and uncertainties and glorious moments and sad moments as we move through our week today, just like the apostles, just like the crowd, just like the Pharisees did during their week so many years ago. So today, we have this weird note by John. And that's where I want to start, because I think this weird note by John, and none of the other Gospels contradict it, but they don't have the same note. This weird little note by John, I think, sets the stage for what this week is really, at least mostly about, when it comes to looking at the apostles. Honestly, when it comes to looking at just about everybody. He has this note where he says, all these things happened, and the disciples didn't realize why this is at all important until after Easter. Let that soak in for a moment. They went to Palm Sunday, where people are like laying stuff down. He's like riding a donkey colt. He's headed in there, and all this hoopla, after he had said repeatedly, like, I'm going to go to Jerusalem, guys. They're going to grab me. They're going to kill me. I'm going to die on a cross. 3 days later, I'm going to resurrect. Meet me in Galilee. Like, he's been saying that for weeks now. And they get to Palm Sunday, and they're just like, all right, another Sunday. When do we get to the chicken? So much so that John has to put an annotation yeah, we wrote this in later because we didn't think about it. See, I think the theme of this week, if you're looking at the apostles, the theme is being unprepared for the thing that has already happened. I mean, we know at the end of that thing, they basically say the Pharisees look out there, they see the crowd, they look at the crowd, they go, man, the world has totally turned behind Jesus on this. There's nothing we can do. Now, of course, they have a plan. What they're saying is they're convincing themselves that the plan is the plan, guys. Everything we've tried hasn't worked. He's here now. He's got a massive crowd. He's going to start a war, and we're all going to die. You, me, and all of them, and we got to save them. The only way to save him is get rid of this guy. As he starts a war with Rome, Rome's going to kill us all. That's what the reference is to. See, the train leaves the station on Palm Sunday. And you'll see as you go to Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday and onward, that there's going to be people who are going to suddenly realize, dude, the train left the station. I've got to try to slam on the brakes. And one after another will either chicken out or they will fail. Time after time after time, because they were unprepared for the thing that already occurred, because it occurred on today, and they didn't even realize it. Now, some of you may be thinking, oh man, I'm going to be told to go be a Boy Scout. Always be prepared. That's not really what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is those times in which it's already occurred. See, Boy Scouts are prepared for the thing that might happen or the thing that is happening. They're not being prepared for the thing that already has happened, because if you got to there, you already sort of messed up, right? Let me tell you a story about what I'm trying to get at. Now, I'm totally stealing this from This American Life on NPR. Okay, so credit where credit's due, not my story. It's totally one I stole from their podcast. So here's the story. Story goes this way. There's a guy. He is a scientist. His specialty is all things bugs, particularly he loves arachnids. Okay? He grew up in an area of the South that has a lot of black widows. So not only has he grown up with black widows, he is literally an expert in spiders. Tell you, I hate spiders, so this is the last thing I'd ever do. And he's getting his boot on one day because he's going to go fishing. He loves fishing. He puts his boot on and he gets a sting that feels like one of those ground hornets we get around here. Y'all know that sting. The sting that just lasts. He pulls his boot off. He looks in. There's a dead black widow. He knows exactly what just occurred. He just got bit. So you'd think any sane person who has all this medical knowledge would go ahead and call 911, or at least get in the car and go to the hospital, or at least tell their wife so she can tell him get in the car and go to the hospital. Right? What does he do? He thinks to himself for a moment and thinks I should probably go to the hospital. But then he thinks to himself, I'm a healthy young man. And I know that generally, if you go to the hospital for a bite from a black widow, they will simply monitor you because there's a good chance that you with painkillers and treatments can write it out and not need the antivenom if you're a particularly healthy young individual. But they monitor you for a reason. But he thinks to himself, but I'm a scientist. I know step by step what's going to happen. If it gets too bad for me, I'll go to the hospital then. I don't want to get a doctor's bill for something that I could just treat at home, right? So what does he do? He goes fishing. He goes out there, he goes fishing, and inevitably symptoms start getting worse and getting worse and getting worse until he ends up having to drive himself to the hospital. And they, of course, treat him there when he's in excruciating pain. And then they call his wife, and he then says he was in a lot of trouble. Understandably. That's what I'm talking about. Like, that guy wasn't not prepared. He, on one level, totally understood what a person should do if bitten. He totally understood what the venom was going to do, right? And yet, he was just like, yeah, and continued on, not facing the reality that is sitting in front of him. He was unprepared for the thing that already occurred. This is sort of true in our own lives. We can do this too. You can look at any scenario where there's some sort of calamity or catastrophe, and if you look at human behavior, some people are prepared, some people are not prepared, and some people, well after it has happened, are still unprepared. Probably look at your own life on that too. We've all had those moments where we haven't adjusted to the new reality standing in front of us. But I think there's two things we can glean from the text that's helpful for us when it comes to how to be prepared. One is paying attention, which sounds easy, but we'll get into why it's not so easy. The other one is self-reflection. We see that the disciples sort of do both. They're trying to pay attention, though they clearly failed on this case, because Jesus has outlined to them at least 5 different times exactly how Holy Week's going to go down. With, he hasn't given them a schedule, but he said like this, and then this, and then this, and then this. Go to Galilee, I'll meet you there. Okay? And they clearly didn't hear him. Now, you all have probably experienced this. How many of you have ever had either a sibling, a spouse, a parent, that you have said something very clearly to, and as they're sitting there going, yeah, I got it, just let me finish this, I got it, that they do not have it. Right? We've all had that. Now, if you're sitting there a little too happy that you're like, yeah, my spouse does that, know that you probably do it too. Okay? This is part of the human experience. Part of what's hard about modern life is that there is a ton of stuff vying for our attention, some important, some not important, some entertaining, some not, out there trying to get our attention at all times. It's why it's important to sort of unhook, hang up, de-link, cut the cord, even if it's just for a few minutes a month, or a few minutes a week, or a few minutes a day. Just step back from all the things demanding your attention and have some alone time. Because it's in those contacts with either yourself when you're reflecting, or when you sit and talk face to face with another human, or even on the phone, where if you've put everything else away, stop the multitasking, that you can really hear, you can really link into your life. But it's more problematic than just finding that time, which is hard enough as it is. The other part of it is making sure that your understanding of reality fits, reality. And that sounds like that'd be really easy, but it's a lot harder than you think. For example, let's say if you as a young person only ever watched, growing up, before you ever started dating, romantic comedies on Lifetime. And you expected that your great romance where you're going to meet your soulmate will look like a movie on Lifetime. You're going to be sorely disappointed. And if it does look like a movie on Lifetime, just a reminder, you have picked up a stalker, not a boyfriend or girlfriend. Okay? Because that's not actually life. Art is super powerful. I talk very positively about art almost all the time, right? Art is this amazing, awesome force that can get us to see things we refuse to see, can have us explore things we don't know how to explore, can have us have conversations we don't know how to have. It's this incredibly powerful tool. That is the good side of art. There is a other side to art. And the other side of art is that art can also mislead us. It can change our perception of reality to non-realities, like watching too many Lifetime movies, like watching too many action movies. If you got hit the way those guys get hit in those action movies, you'd be dead. A lot of folks don't realize that. That's because their reality, even though they didn't know it, got skewed. You think guns work the way they do in action movies? They don't. It goes in all different directions. So part of that unhooking, that unplugging, that taking those times to have that intentional moments where you don't just meet with the people you love, the community you're in, the places you are, but do it in such a way in which you're conscious that what you've watched, what you've consumed, may be giving you false ideas of what reality's about. Having some self-doubt and humility is good. But it's not just about paying attention, because we're all going to mess it up someday. For example, I went until my 30s, and I was married, and my wife decided to make Jell-O pudding one day. And she said, honey, I'm going to make some Jell-O pudding for tonight. Do you think that'll go good as a dessert for the kids? I said, well, that's great, but you're out of time. You only have 6 hours. My wife looked at me with the most dumbfounded look in her life. She's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well, instant Jell-O pudding, it needs 24 hours to set. And then she just looked at me with this very compassionate look. And she said, who told you that? And I was like, my mom? You believed instant Jell-O pudding needed 24 hours to set? And I was like, I'm believing it less now. I had to call my mom later. See, things will sometimes pass us because we just mark them as normal. We just don't question them. We just go on. We can't do that for everything we do. We should do as much as we can, but sometimes we miss things. Sometimes we don't realize the word instant and what it means. And that's why self-reflection is so important. If there's any theme to my preaching that you guys have hopefully picked up as you've heard me week in and week out, is that at the end of every sermon, just about, I will send you with something to think about, something to pray about, something to ponder. I do that because I believe at the core of our Christian mission is always self-reflection. We need to stop and take time to look back at our day, at our week, at our year, and ask ourselves, with what we know now, with the hindsight being 2020, can we look back and see God at work a month ago, a week ago, a year ago, or maybe in the moment we couldn't? And what does that say about who we are, where we were, but more importantly, where we're headed? That's why it's so important that not only you plug into the people around you and talk and get to know them and plug into reality, but that you also take time to step back from reality, not to go back to the screens, but rather to go inside oneself. Some quiet time with yourself and with God, to simply look back and reflect on the day, the week, the month, the year. So as you go out today, on this greatest and holiest of weeks, the thing I ask you to do, take some time. Take time to sit and talk to your families. Take time to sit and talk to your friends. Take time to do something in your community that you value, that you care about, that matters to you. In other words, engage reality. But also take some time to yourself. Reflect on how that went. How did that day go? How did that week go? How did your month go? How did the past few years go? Because it's when you do that, you often figure out who you were, where you are, and most importantly, where God's calling you to. Amen.